So I have something I'm wondering, and I know we're all hyped about Furina at the moment, and I'm hyped as well. She is the Archon of the Year, and the way Hoyo explained her kit, a Hydro AoE sub DPS who buffs the team. On the surface, obviously this kit sounds amazing. As you might know, I'm a Theorycrafter and speedrunner who used to do a lot of sheet calculations, but actually these days I really don't put too much stock in the theoretical stuff. So there's a lot of things about Furina and how her teams will work in practice that I just won't know until she releases and we've had time to properly test her out. So the topic of this video is speculation that I might have with her, which is that I just don't know whether she'll be a small upgrade, a big upgrade, or even not an upgrade at all for some teams and some types of accounts. Even though I'm sure she's an Archon, they will make her strong, but nothing's guaranteed. And I'm thinking there's a good chance that this might happen with some popular teams that I will mention. But of course, this video could end up being an unfounded concern, and when she releases, she does end up being so overpowered in all these teams. But this video is nothing to do with Furina's own strength, but more that since you have to build a team around her and what sacrifices you might have to do. So let me explain. Let's look at Hu Tao teams, for example. So for the most part, Hu Tao has two types of top teams, which is a double hydro team and also a Bennett VV vape team. First of all, double hydro is her most popular teams, and they're also much easier to play. And for 9 out of 10 players, this is the team that you care about the most, and you don't really care about squeezing slightly better performance by sweating and tryharding to play a VV vape team, and that's completely fine. Double hydro teams don't really have complicated setups or strategies. You usually just activate everyone's abilities and then the 3 character core all deal damage between them. One of the strengths of double hydro teams is that the 4th teammate is extremely flexible, and there's so many different options who can perform well. Generally, I would say Kazuha, Sucrose or Zhongli are the ideal choices, the most popular ones, depending on if you need a grouper or a shielder. But nonetheless, the flexibility is there. So what this means is it should probably be straightforward for Furina to come in and replace either Xingqiu or Yelan, and then you put in a required team healer as the final teammate in order to recover from Furina's team HP drain. We might have to test out a bunch of different healers to find out the best fit. But here, Furina buffing the team and bringing damage to the table, I'm expecting her to fit into double hydro teams easily. I also imagine her off-field attacks being on her skill, so you don't require her burst, to be very nice quality of life. Just finishing off enemies in the Abyss and the Overworld without needing to burst, it should be pretty nice. However, let's now look at VV vape teams. You know these teams feature Hu Tao, Bennett, one of the hydro characters, and either Kazuha or Sucrose. The strength of VV vape teams is that you use 2 support slots to Omega buff both Hu Tao and Yelan or Xingqiu. They both get a ton of buffs and debuffs, and the hydro character can even get pyro application for them to forward vaporize, and then obviously during your main damage window they apply hydro for Hu Tao to vaporize. You're also guaranteed to get a good grouping character because you play either Kazuha or Sucrose, and as well as that you also have Bennett, who is a very good healer. VV Vape is also a lot more difficult team to play, and to be honest, achieving all these different damage boosts, it often requires very particular setups. And one of the most important factors of this is putting all your team's damage in these 2 characters. It lets the team scale well with their investment. Like, do you have great artifacts, C1, Staff of Homer, Aqua Simulacra for Yelan? Everything that increases your damage ceilings, you get a lot more out of those in a VV Vape team. It's basically a similar concept to hypercarry teams, and in essence, the more of your team's damage is centered around a character, the more visible each increase for them is. Whereas In teams where damage is split more evenly between a bunch of characters, like 3 or even 4 characters in a double hydro team, then it's likely to have less buffs in your team, and for example, you won't get as much value from Hu Tao C1 and being able to get more charge attacks. So what does this all mean? I don't know how much buffs Furina is going to exactly give to Hu Tao or Yelan, but being realistic, it's a very tall order to imagine it being more than you'd get from Bennett and Kozwa. They are the 2 premier buffers in the game after all. You have to expect that a key part of Furina's value is buffing the team, but also dealing good sub DPS damage herself. So putting her in a Hu Tao team would most likely split damage between 3 teammates, on top of potentially quality of life utility, whether it's Kazua's grouping or Zhongli's shielding. Now, whilst it's very possible that Furina does buff more and she does bring more sub DPS damage than a Kazuha in this team, it is hard for me to account how big of a practical loss losing Kazuha's utility is, and I know from speedrunning with these kinds of Hu Tao teams myself, this might actually be a huge deal in practice even if you're not speedrunning. Utility characters like Kazuha and Zhongli just feel really natural and really good to play. Also, I do notice that a lot of team-wide healers are 5-star characters like Jean or Baizhu. So you can see very quickly that the cost of these new Hu Tao teams can ramp up. And I think unless you're playing something like Hu Tao, Furina, Xingqiu, Bennett, you aren't really going to be able to make a low-cost team. This could be a concern for newer players and also for speedrunners. Overall, for Hu Tao teams, as I said, whilst I wouldn't be surprised if Furina does come in and changes the game in regards to double hydro teams, I do think there is a chance that these new teams could still fall behind the old Bennett Kazuha teams at certain levels of investment. It's honestly hard for me to tell which way it's going to go. We just have to wait until she releases and then see how the meta develops. And then for Neuvillette, it might be a similar situation. It's hard to say. In my initial review of him, I did think that he lacked synergistic teammate options, especially with Hydro. It was only really Mona and Child, and even then, they weren't really doing that much for him. So when they revealed what Furina does and how she buffs teammates and synergizes with teammates who increase and decrease in HP, putting 2 and 2 together, it seems so obvious that they designed both Furina and Neuvillette to work well together. So I'm very excited to test them out, and it seems almost too good to be true. But just like with Hu Tao, a question I have is that she doesn't exactly just slot into his teams, and it's not that simple. So as we know, one of Neuvillette's strongest teams at the moment is with Kazuha, Zhongli and Xiangling. I covered this team in my previous video, but one of the strengths is that this team super buffs Neuvillette's damage, but also the team has a lot of flexibility to help him adjust to various situations. Like, you can vaporize hits with Gorba only, you can use Gorba and Pyronada, or even Pyro absorbed Kazuha burst, and you can play around all of them. And it's one of the reasons why Xiangling having high energy requirements as the only Pyro character in this team isn't that much of an issue, because these aren't Xiangling DPS teams, and this team is not reliant on her constantly having her Pyronada burst active in order for the team to function. It's a very flexible team in that regard. So anyway, we've come to acknowledge the strength of this particular team. Now, my concern is similar to the Hu Tao situation, is that this team is working as a cohesive unit, and you can't really replace a character without the playstyle changing. So I'm guessing Xiangling basically is the first one to go, since with 2 Hydro damage dealers now, he probably isn't going to be getting forward vapes anymore. And I thought after that, you would still have to add a team healer too, since Furina will be needing to drain the team's HP. And whilst Neuvillette can self-heal himself, he obviously can't heal the whole team. And it's too early to say, and I'm not really sure myself the damage implications of not being able to fully heal your team. But at least we can obviously tell survivability wise, it's going to be a problem if your teammates aren't getting healed. So that means probably Zhongli is the next character to go, and you have to replace him with a team healer. And then this raises a few questions. First of all, at this point, you've replaced 2 key teammates, 2 key buffers of Zhongli and Xiangling. And I don't know how much Furina is going to end up buffing him, but it might be a case where Neuvillette's personal damage actually gets lower in these new teams. But the plan is to make it up with Furina's sub DPS damage, which probably might be an overall upgrade for a lot of situations. But it might not be an upgrade if your Neuvillette is well invested at low cost and you want to utilize his fast setups and front-loaded damage. I can definitely see a possibility where at lower cost levels, this vaporize team without Furina is still the way to go. Probably might be weaker, but there's definitely a world where it is possible. And the second concern I have is in regards to the team healer. I know Baiju, for example, has healing and his small shielding, which gives interruption resistance. But aside from him, with other healers we might have to pick, they probably don't give interruption resistance. So you might be playing a team where Neuvillette is vulnerable to getting staggered out of a charge attack. And obviously that's not a great thing. Now, if this is correct, then it also makes his C1 better, and Hoyo might have designed the C1 intentionally for this precise future situation. Since both parts of his C1 solves this new team, you get an extra stack when playing with Furina, and also he doesn't get staggered anymore when you replace your Zhongli with a healer. Now again, it is very possible that these double Hydro Neuvillette Furina teams are still very strong at C0, but without these extra benefits of C1, again there could be a world where the old vaporized teams pull ahead. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Like I said, these are just some thoughts I had. They might be unfounded concerns, and Furina might just be so strong that she is always going to be the strongest teammate in these Hu Tao and Neuvillette situations. But I hope you did find this discussion helpful, and you do agree that there might be scenarios where these new teams do actually fall behind the current strongest teams. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I should be putting out more Furina videos in the coming days.